Caregiving can sometimes feel like an impossible struggle. Caregivers may be torn between taking care of loved ones and trying to maintain balance in life. The good news is that it doesn't have to be that way. The Caring Generation with host Pamela D Wilson is here to focus on the conversation of caring. You're not alone. In fact, you're in exactly the right place to share stories and learn tips and resources to help you and your loved ones. So now, please welcome the host of The Caring Generation, Pamela D Wilson.
This is Pamela D Wilson, caregiving expert, speaker, consultant, and guardian of the Caring Generation. The Caring Generation focuses on the conversation of caring, giving us permission to talk about aging, the challenges of caregiving, and everything in between. It's no surprise that needing care or becoming a caregiver changes everything. The Caring Generation is here to guide you along the journey, to let you know that you're not alone. You are in exactly the right place to share stories and learn about caregiving programs and resources to help you and your loved ones plan for what's ahead. Invite your parents, spouses, family, friends, co-workers, and everybody you know to listen to the show. If you have a question or an idea for a future program, share your idea with me by commenting on social media posts on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and LinkedIn. You can also go to my website, PamelaDWilson.com, click on the Contact Me button, and complete a caregiver survey. This week, we're answering the question of why is problem solving so hard? This is actually a complicated question because problem solving, when done most effectively, means that the person solving the problem has a thorough understanding of the problem. This might seem really simple, right? It's actually more complicated than you think. During this program, I'll share 8 reasons for why problem solving is so hard. Actions that caregivers can take so that you're not surprised by unexpected problems. And we'll also talk about the effect of problem solving approaches, realism, optimism, and avoidance. Let's begin with the idea that to become an effective problem solver, you must be an effective question asker. Why is problem solving so hard? Number one is that we don't recognize that there is a problem. You can't solve a problem you don't know exists until it blows up and you have to do something about it. Why does this happen? It's simple. Problems sneak up on us. We're too busy to notice the little things. This thing that we don't know about or can't see can relate to the idea of change blindness. Change blindness is when we get so used to something that small changes happen right before our eyes and we don't notice them. Then over time, these small changes multiply and become significant. It happens to all of us. But if you're a caregiver, small changes in health or the ability of loved ones are a big deal because they will require more of your time and effort. Let's look at a couple of examples. One is memory loss. You see your aging parents every day. While you might realize or think, well, they're a little forgetful, you just chalk it up to mom and dad getting older. Your sister, who lives 1,000 miles away, comes home for a visit and stays with your parents for an entire week. She is in shock at how forgetful Dad has become. She tells you very excitedly, oh my gosh, Dad has 5 boxes of the same cereal in the cabinet, 10 packages of toilet paper in the basement, and late notices for past due bills are showing up in the mail. Plus, she refuses to go anywhere with your father if he insists on driving the car. Plus, she's noticed there are prescription bottles from months ago in the house with all of the pills still sitting inside the bottles. Dad's not taking his medications. Your sister did a little research. One of the medications Dad was prescribed is for memory loss, but your parents never mentioned any of this to you. You visit your parents every couple of weeks, but you never go through their cabinets, their mail, or their prescription bottles. And if you do go anywhere, you always drive so you don't notice that your father has issues with safety and driving. So as that caregiver, how could you have possibly missed all of these warning signs? These potential problems that are about to get really big. Sometimes being too close to a problem means we don't see the problem because we get used to it. On the other hand, sometimes we don't want to see the problem because it can mean more work for us. We don't have time to get involved. It's not our responsibility. So if parents don't ask for help, their children don't know there is a problem and then don't offer help. So in this circumstance, change blindness is personal. We all get used to things. And unless somebody else points out something to us, we may not notice. And then there's that other thing. None of us like to be told that we are doing something wrong or that something's wrong. And we certainly don't want to be told what to do about it. So all of these aspects complicate why problem solving is so difficult. Let's return to things we get used to that can cause problems. For example, that leaky kitchen sink can turn into a huge, expensive plumbing problem. Or you have what you think is an age spot on your face, but until you go to the doctor, you don't realize it's skin cancer and you need surgery for basal cell carcinoma. That's scary. These issues happen to people every day. They happen to newscasters and celebrities. One example is Kathy Sabine. She's a meteorologist from 9 News here in Denver, and I'll place a link to her skin cancer story in the show transcript. You can look at the before and after pictures of her face that was treated for skin cancer that she didn't realize she had. It's actually something to see. So the first answer to why we don't know any better is that we don't see things as important enough to start asking questions. Is this nothing or is it something I should investigate? We may not have the time. Can this add to problems? Yes, not having time, not being attentive can be a problem. I know that's not the answer you want to hear, but it's an honest answer. Caregivers don't have time. Hearing information we don't like should also not be viewed as a problem, but as an opportunity to change something if this issue could possibly blossom into a bigger problem. It's the idea of a blessing in disguise. Something unexpected happens that causes us to do something, and it may not be a big deal. But then we look back a week later or a month later, and we think, oh my gosh, that unexpected thing that I addressed saved us or me from a potentially huge and disastrous situation that, by the grace of God or whatever you believe in, you avoided. A lack of experience in not noticing something different poses other problems. Not having the knowledge to react when noticing something that could be a potential problem is a problem. Now, you don't want to look at everything in life as potential problems because that would drive us crazy, right? But what you might do is begin paying attention, close attention, to interactions with the people that you care for, and start writing down or recording things you see that seem a little unusual, out of the ordinary, don't make sense, no matter how small or big they are. What things were your parents previously able to do that they can't do today? The same goes for you. Are there things that you can't do today that you could do yesterday? These are hints of potential problems. There's also a quality called discernment, which means grasping and comprehending things that are not obvious. How do you gain this quality or skill? Same thing. Begin noticing changes in your abilities as the caregiver. Where are you helping more? The question here is, should you really be helping more? Or should you be helping the person you take care of to be more proactive about why they can't do something so that they can continue to do that task? Let's use a simple example for aging parents, basement laundry. You're worried about mom or dad walking down the steps to the laundry room because they have poor balance and they're physically weak. You're worried they might fall and break a hip or injure themselves. So you're thinking, well, I'll just move the washer and dryer upstairs. They can do the laundry up there. No big deal. But is this really solving the right problem? What is the problem? Obvious. Mom and dad used to be able to do their laundry, and today it's not easy. Why? Why is doing laundry difficult? Because mom and dad are physically weak. They get exhausted walking up and down the steps. They have poor balance. So the problem is not doing the laundry. The problem is your parents have become physically weak. That makes it difficult for them to do activities. So the question to ask is, if mom or dad become physically stronger and their balance gets better, can they do their laundry? Possibly. And if that happens, how many other activities can mom or dad continue to do for themselves that you as the caregiver will not have to do? It's a perfect example of why some problems are difficult to solve. It's because we're not solving the right problem. We actually may be causing another problem. Think about this. Moving the laundry upstairs means your parents will be less active and become physically weaker and potentially have worse balance. So, by moving the washer and dryer upstairs, you are contributing to your parents' inability to manage their day-to-day tasks. The solution really is request a physical therapy evaluation from their doctor. Find out what exercises, what they have to do to regain their physical strength and their balance. And then, even bigger, you've got to convince your parents to participate in these daily exercises to get better, stronger, and improve their balance. What this all means is that your parents do their laundry, not you. The blessing in disguise here, that you may not realize, is that becoming stronger makes your parents less likely to fall performing another activity, and they can stay independent much longer than they could have if you move the washer and dryer upstairs. So by understanding the problem, you've actually solved more than one problem. This leads us to number 2 for why is problem solving so hard? The answer? Chasing the wrong issues. Let's take this to another level. Are there problems or issues that repeat in your life? Is there a revolving door of the same issue that has this pattern? A barrier to problem solving can be the way we look at a problem. There's repetitive actions that everyone takes that results in outcomes or actions, right? Things we want and things we don't want. It's the well-known idea of input-output. You put something in, you get something out. For every action, there is a reaction. So one thought to this is to look at your problem-solving approach. If you don't like the output or the reaction, what are you putting in? Think of this like a recipe. You want to bake a cake. Instead of buying a box of Betty Crocker or Duncan Heinz cake mix and a can of frosting, you want to make the cake from scratch. You do this and oops, it doesn't turn out. The cake is sunken in the middle. Maybe it's raw. Maybe you tried to take the cake out of the pan and half of it actually stayed in the pan because you didn't butter or flour it appropriately. Or the frosting you made was runny, so you got lumps of frosting around the sides of the cake stand and no frosting on the cake. All that effort and you've got a cake that you can't really show to anybody. Now, the cake may look terrible, but you try it and it tastes pretty good. So you eat it anyway. And you try to think of what to do differently the next time. Or maybe you just toss the cake in the trash and you chalk it up to a learning experience. Solving a problem that doesn't turn out the way you expect can be an amazing learning experience. Number 3 for why problem solving is so hard is you face a huge-sized problem. Not a cake-sized problem, a mountain-sized problem. In caregiving, huge-sized problems can be things like realizing that it's time to move mom or dad to assisted living or another living situation, but they disagree and they are not going. They've dug in their heels. Or maybe you moved your parents or in-laws into your home. A couple years later, you want them out and you want their life back and you don't know how to make it happen. Or maybe your brother or sister, who is the main caregiver, has become over-controlling. You're worried your brother or sister is taking advantage of your parents financially and emotionally, but you don't want to cause problems. These huge-sized problems can feel impossible to solve because they're going to take your time and they may turn your life and your family relationships upside down. So what do? Don't ignore it. I recommend breaking up the issues into stages after you confirm that you know what the real problem is. That can take a bit of digging. But if you can get moving to solve one small piece of the problem, what you'll find is you'll gain momentum and you'll be able to solve the rest of the problem. Waiting because you don't know what to do can make the situation worse than it is today. If you have a huge-sized problem, it probably didn't get this big overnight. You just didn't notice. Or maybe you delayed action because you felt guilty or for some other reason. If so, you're in good company. Guilt and feeling overwhelmed prevents many caregivers, many people from solving life problems. Number 4 for why is problem solving so hard is that we may be waiting for someone else to step in or step up, or we want to be rescued. All unlikely to happen unless you do something to make it happen. If you're waiting for uninvolved family members to start helping overnight and they haven't, that's probably not going to happen. If you need help from a social services agency or someone at the doctor's office and they're not calling you back, don't keep waiting. Do something about it. Specific to the doctor's office or the social services agency, become that squeaky wheel and call every day and leave a very nice message if you have to. If the doctor isn't responsive, consider changing doctors. There can come to a point where waiting for others to do something or waiting for a time to be perfect isn't going to happen. There's a point where you have to take the bull by the horns and make something happen. You have to decide to move forward in the problem-solving process. Let's take a short break and return to why is problem solving so hard. We'll look at solutions for problem solving and things that you can do to become unstuck. I'm Pamela D Wilson, caregiving expert, advocate, and author. You're with me on The Caring Generation. Check out my website, PamelaDWilson.com, where you'll find all kinds of help, my online course, this podcast, articles in my caregiving library. There's something for everyone at PamelaDWilson.com. Stay with me. We'll be right back. This is Pamela D. Wilson, caregiving expert, advocate, and speaker on the Caring Generation. Check out my website, PamelaDWilson.com. Share it with other people. There is so much helpful information and support there. You can also check out my YouTube channel, hundreds of videos answering questions that caregivers ask, much like this podcast. If you have an idea for a show, go to my website, click on the Contact Me button, fill out my caregiver survey, and let me know what you'd like to hear. So let's get back to problem solving. Why do we wait to take action? Why is problem solving so hard? Number 5, not being personally affected by an issue, but watching other people and not realizing what's going on. Let's use doctor appointments for parents as an example. You think mom or dad should see the doctor every 3 months, but they're resisting and refusing, and they don't really say why. You see this as mom or dad being stubborn. They don't want to do what's good for them. But could it really be something else? Should you start asking questions and maybe learn that they don't have the money to pay the copay for that appointment? You do a little investigation. You realize that copays to see a medical specialist are $50 per visit. Because you're healthy and you don't go to the doctor, you had no idea medical care was so expensive. Or maybe you learn that a single prescription dad should take for his memory loss costs $100. Being unable to pay for medical care, purchase a drug or get to doctor's appointments because of a lack of transportation. They're major issues for aging parents. And your parents may be too proud or embarrassed that money is an issue. So if any one or many of these are issues, investigate the options to solve money, transportation, whatever the problem is. Rather than assuming that parents or anybody is stubborn or don't want to listen, get to the bottom of the problem. What is the real issue? Noticing the potential for a problem before it becomes a colossal problem can be a huge benefit. And this means not ignoring the problem, not waiting for somebody else to step in, or not avoiding or delaying doing something because you think the problem might go away. Is that going to happen? Maybe or maybe not. There are times when problems do solve themselves in one way or another, but they may create another problem. So what else prevents problem solving? Number 6, denial or not wanting to change beliefs or how we think about a problem. That is another problem. Let's use the idea of a primary caregiver. Elderly parents or a spouse believe that this primary caregiver, a son or daughter, a spouse, husband, wife, is the only person that can help. And more often, they don't want anyone else involved. They don't want the idea of having a stranger come into the house. It could also be a parent not having money to pay for outside assistance, as we discussed before. Primary caregivers who are adult children or spouses don't have a perceived cost to the person who expects them to provide care. But the problem here is neither does the family caregiver understand their perceived value. Perceived cost, perceived value. What does this mean? The time caregivers give to care for a parent or spouse means that this time can't be used for other activities. Some caregivers give up their jobs to become a full-time caregiver. What is the value of that employment? First, you have the salary or the wages that you give up. Then you have contributions to Medicare and Social Security that you and your employer contribute that you can't get back because you can't get time back. Then, caregivers who give up employment lose skills or their skills become rusty. This means that re-entering the workforce, trying to get a job after you're done with caregiving, if you ever are, will become more difficult because you are underskilled or you're unqualified. Then you have all these social and emotional costs. Caregivers give up friends, they become depressed, they become isolated. All this turns into health issues. So while an elderly parent or a spouse may view the caregiver as not having a cost or a price, aging parents also don't show appreciation for what a caregiver gives up. These are topics that families don't feel comfortable discussing that eventually become problems. Caregivers don't realize the significance of the choices they make when they make them. You don't discuss what you're giving up with your aging parents or your spouse or put a financial cost on your effort. Why? Because this is the way it's always been done. This is number 7 for why is problem solving so hard? Expectations. Because caregiving is what is expected of family members. Stop right there. This is an example of not wanting to change personal beliefs about a topic, being a family caregiver. So, concerning a caregiving problem, are you or an aging parent stuck because you refuse to think differently? That in itself is a complex problem to identify, admit, and solve. Questions around this. Are my beliefs the problem? And am I unwilling to change my thoughts about duty and responsibility and the issue and consider that there are other options? Is the problem that I may not like those other options? Are there solutions I may not be aware of? Does somebody else know more about this subject than me? Am I ignoring the facts of the situation? If so, why? Most of the why that we ignore facts or don't want to think differently is that doing so can take a lot of effort. It can toss our lives upside down. Why is problem solving so hard? Ingrained beliefs, personal stubbornness about the way we think things have to be, and making excuses about why we can't change. Everybody can change. It's that we are unwilling to change. So where does all of this point? Points back to the individual. I mentioned discernment before, which, like problem solving, is a learned skill. It would be great if we could become excellent problem solvers in our teens or early 20s and take this experience and knowledge with us throughout life. Life would be so much easier. The problem is we need life experience to create problems, to create experience and knowledge and wisdom so that we can solve those problems. But this also leads us to the question of how much do we really want to know? Caregivers have so much on their minds that more details go in and out of the brain. There's only so much attention span available, only so much energy available. If you're a caregiver, how do you notice if you're overwhelmed? It's easier than you think. Think of a day when you forget to do something routine that you usually do. You lock yourself out of the house. You were inattentive and you misplaced an item. And you're frustrated with yourself because you're thinking, oh my God, I'm wasting time trying to find my keys or that envelope or the bill I was supposed to pay and I can't pay it. This forgetfulness or absent-mindedness is the caregiver's brain on overload. All of this leads to number 8. Caregivers or anyone who have a problem to solve may not want to speak with or ask a person who may have opinions that are different or opposite from the way that the caregiver thinks. Remember, we don't want to have disagreements. We don't want to be pushed to think differently. Let's look at a common example of this that everybody can agree with. Politics, Democrats and Republicans. Opinions don't get much more polarized than this. Polarized means opposite or opposed. Society today is more polarized than it has ever been because the press and the media fuel polarization to extreme degrees. The result is people don't get along, and that's a problem. But this is because people rely on others to present the truth or accurate information. But you're never going to realize that you're vulnerable until you realize that you can be manipulated by people who give you false information or only present half of the story. And then you're making decisions based on bad information. Not having enough information, not asking questions, not really learning what's going on is the leading cause of problem solving that goes bad. Did you ever think that the government spends millions of dollars to solve problems and they're throwing the money away because that's really not the problem to be solved? Why does this happen? Everything we talked about today. You don't recognize there's a problem or you're blind to change happening before your eyes. You haven't identified the right problem. Remember that laundry example? The problem to solve is physical weakness, not moving the washer and dryer upstairs. Then we have huge-sized problems that seem too big to solve, so nothing is done. Think United States healthcare, right? We wait for somebody else to step in or solve the problem. We refuse to change our beliefs. That problem doesn't personally affect us, so we don't know why it's happening. We don't ask those questions. And then we think, well, this is the way it's always been done, why change? And then last, we're closed-minded to the help and information from others, and we don't evaluate it. We don't ask questions. We just blindly believe somebody, and that takes us down the wrong path. Let's go back to the idea of perceived cost and perceived value. In my opinion, caregivers devalue their efforts. If the help you provide means that elderly parents continue living in their homes versus moving to assisted living, the value of your time and efforts is $40,000 to $60,000 a year. And if you've given up a job to become the caregiver, add on your salary, benefits, retirements, other things that you can't get back, like good health. Your combined value to your parents may be anywhere from $60,000 to $100,000 a year. While we don't want to put a price tag on caregiving or helping other people, if families were more practical about the life trade-offs and the value caregivers provide, we may not end up with these huge size problems or wait for other people to step in. How many caregiving issues could be prevented if we didn't ignore the facts but focused on personal responsibility? Or at least if we were more aware of the consequences of the choices we make earlier in life. How do we do that? We start asking questions. What is going to be the result of this action? Remember, input, output. What you put in, you get out. Predicting the future is an interesting thought. Caregivers think, oh gosh, if I only knew what was going to happen tomorrow. But if we knew everything that was going to happen in life, would we try to change the events instead of learning from them? How many movies do you watch where people go back in time? And I'm going to really go back in time for this one. There's an old Michael Fox movie from 1985 called Back to the Future. And that title is somewhat misleading because Marty McFly, or Michael J. Fox, gets sent 30 years into the past. He actually meets his mother before he was even born, who had a crush on him. Check for the link in the show transcript if you were born after 1985 and you have no idea what I'm talking about. It's a great movie. So then let's talk about planning and prevention. While we can't plan for everything, we can anticipate needs based on information and research that's widely available, but we have to be interested enough to search for it and to ask those questions. The best way to problem solve is to avoid blame but focus on new approaches, which means we have to be open-minded. Being non-judgmental, got a little tongue-tied there, about the cause of the problem is also another path to solving the problem. Now, this can be really hard to do because a lot of times we want to blame people for what they did that contributed to the problem. Well, you can do that, but it's not going to make solving the problem any easier, and it's certainly not going to make your relationships with these people that you are blaming any better. Another consideration. Approaches to problem solving can correspond with lifelong habits: realism, optimism, and avoidance. What have been your patterns related to these three things? And your parents' patterns. Here's the fact. We can't get time back. That last minute we spent, it's gone forever. Tomorrow will be over in 25 hours. So with this in mind, how do you choose to spend your time? What inputs are on your to-do list, realizing that problems repeat in life based on inputs and outputs? If you have a problem to solve, how will you approach it? Think realism, optimism, or avoidance. And let's look at an example of this with a person with terminal cancer, which means they are dying of the cancer that's diagnosed, and their options. So one person could want to try all the life-saving treatments with the hope that there's going to be a cure. So we've got chemotherapy and radiation. So this person spends multiple times a week going back and forth to the hospital, to treatment centers, and mostly they feel pretty sick. And unfortunately, their efforts are not going to change the end point, which is dying. Another person in the same situation may not choose treatment, but pain and symptom management. They don't want to go through chemotherapy or radiation and be sicker than they are. Now, this person instead chooses to spend, let's say, that last 6 months with loved ones to make as many memories as possible. They travel, they arrange aspects of their life so that their spouse or their children aren't going to have a mess of details to deal with after they pass. Now, neither choice is wrong. We all have a choice about how to deal with problems with bad news: realism, optimism, or avoidance. And there's differing options about how to deal with bad news. We can avoid it, we cannot discuss it. But in this case of terminal cancer, the outcome is death. It's going to be the same whether families talk about it or not. Some people believe that the fact that news is unpleasant is not a reason to avoid the news. Imagine the opportunity to spend time with loved ones and say goodbye to everybody, rather than having death be a surprise. Why have a celebration at your funeral Why not celebrate life while you're still living? If you're in this situation, you could write personal letters to your best friends and your children so they have something to remember you by when you're gone. So while a terminal cancer diagnosis can be viewed as a bad news or a problem, it can also be viewed as an opportunity to make the best of the time you have left. Now, not everybody has time to plan for their death, but the truth is we have a lifetime to plan for our death. So many people die unexpectedly from an accident. My sister was killed in a car accident. She was here one moment, gone the next. Or an emergent health problem. My father went to the hospital for a simple procedure. He didn't wake up the next morning. He died. So no matter how difficult each day is, it can be viewed as a blessing or a curse. Why is problem solving so hard? There are so many reasons. How can we get better at problem solving? That's a great question to ask. One suggestion is go back, listen to this program again, share it with people that you know who are having difficulty solving problems. See if any of the ideas that I mentioned match your experiences. Decide what you can and will do differently. You can't get time back, but you can stop repeating issues that happen in your life, and you can make the future better. Thank you all for continuing to post questions for this podcast and the videos I share on my YouTube channel. If you're looking for answers to caregiving and aging questions, visit my website, PamelaDWilson.com, where you will find caregiver education and resources in my caregiving library, my Caring for Aging Parents blog, my book, The Caregiving Trap, plus an extensive step-by-step online open course that takes you through the A to Z of caring for elderly parents or yourself. You can also join my online Facebook caregiver group called the Caregiving Trap. This is Pamela D Wilson, caregiving expert on the caring generation. I look forward to being with you again soon. God bless you all. Sleep well tonight. Have a fabulous day tomorrow, and enjoy each day until we are here together again.
Tune in each week for The Caring Generation with host Pamela D. Wilson. Come join the conversation and see how Pamela can provide solutions and peace of mind for everyone. Here on Pamela D. Wilson's The Caring Generation.